What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and I'm going to finally finish out my Spelljammer Adventures in Space content. We pretty much covered the entirety, or at least everything I wanted to, from the Astral Adventures guide. I'm not going to really cover the adventure, because I don't really think there's anything worth covering there, personal opinion. And adventures are always kind of hard to cover, because they're usually long, although this one is not. I'm going to talk about the monsters, because that is one aspect that I do think is relatively well done, although there's not a ton, as it is only a 64-page monster book. Reminder that we do still maybe at some point have more free monsters coming, because we did originally get 10 excuse me, free monsters from the Monstrous Compendium that came out, was that in April? And that gave us 10 Spelljammer monsters, so you can kind of use those to append to the Boo's Astral Menagerie as well. So before we jump in, I just wanted to say we're at 98K. We are just 2K shy, a little less than 2K shy from the 100K goal, and I would love it if you guys could help me reach that goal before PAX Unplugged so we can have a party. So, all right, let's go ahead and dive right in. So we'll start off, again, here it is. I'm on D&D Beyond. You can see here it is. There is a handful of monsters, so I will tell you up front, this will be a long one. At some point, I will get around to putting, or someone will be nice enough to comment, and we'll get around to putting timestamps in here. I have YouTube set up to do auto chapters, which it's supposed to detect that, but I don't think it's ever worked for me. But there is a little bit up front, so let's talk about what we have here. So this is kind of everything that is in advance of the actual monsters, right? So we're talking about kind of up front. So we have Astral Variants. This is a first thing. This is, again, kind of adding stuff in, so I'll read it here, right? If you want to have even more creatures to populate your adventures in space, look no further than the Monster Manual. Entities of the outer plane, such as angels, devils, slotty, and so on, can be found on the astral plane as well as the material plane. Same can be said for aboleths, mind flayers, and so on. Practically any terrestrial creature can be turned into an astral dwelling creature, whether it requires air or not. For example, a stone giant living on an asteroid might rely on an asteroid's air envelope for survival, or might not need to breathe air at all. Similarly, a mimic stowing away aboard a spelljamming ship might be an ordinary specimen, or one that is adapted to wild space. So it says, you can turn any creature into a wild space by giving them unusual in nature. This creature doesn't require air. That seems like a kind of like, I would have loved, I've expressed my interest in templates before. Again, these were things that existed in older editions. A lot of folks have established them in their third-party content, where it's basically something that you just apply and, like, skin it, or almost think of it like a filter, almost like an Instagram filter, right? You apply this filter on top of the monster, and it changes it in some way. All they're saying here is just make it so they don't need to breathe air. I think we could add more, but that's fine. It's at least an attempt, so I appreciate it. Right? So it says, this book is a companion to the Monster Manual and uses a similar presentation. If you're unfamiliar with the stat block, I don't think anybody's really unfamiliar with stat blocks at this point. That seems like this is wasted material in my mind, but all right. And we have the stat blocks by challenge rating, which is fine. So we can see we go from challenge rating 0 all the way up through 18. It says some creatures have weapons that deal unusual damage types and spellcastings that function in an atypical way. For example, many Astral Elves deal extra radiant damage with their weapon attacks. This extra damage isn't a feature of the weapon. Such an exception is a special feature of a stat block and presents how the creature uses its weapon or casts its spells. I don't know if we really need an explanation for that. I guess maybe if they're thinking that someone's going to take the weapon and maybe the weapon does it. I don't know. This seems like we're going into very specific areas here, but all right. Meeting magic item requirements. If a stat block contains a magic item, the creature is considered a member of that class for the purpose of meeting prerequisites for magic items. And then again, we have this little astral encounter table, which has if you encounter them in wild space, how do they react to you, right? Here's their initial attitude. And then we have a wild space and astral sea, and then ship encounters. We've covered these in the past. They were on the DM screen. All right, so that's enough of that. Let's dive into the bestiary, however you pronounce it. So like I said, I'm going to tell you up front, this is going to be a long video. There's a lot to cover here. I was originally going to probably consider possibly doing this by like a numerical section, like A to D and, F to G, or however we wanted to do it. But I think we're just going to We'll go as long as I feel like I can go, and then we'll stop. All right, Aartuks, intelligent plant creatures that live to wage war. Beholders destroyed their original homeworld and scattered the universe across the material plane. They have formed small nomadic cells. Let's see what they look like. They look almost like a plant starfish is what I'm going to call them based on that. So here is, we have 3 stat blocks for them. The priest, the war. Oh, and they do look different, right? So here's the warrior. Here is the priest, and this is the elder. Okay, so they are plants. Nice to see some new plant creatures in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. We don't have a lot, so I'm always a fan of that. This guy's a challenge rating 3. Spider climb. I guess it kind of makes sense with the anatomy here. 2 branch attacks, 2 radiant pellet attacks, or 1 of each. 10-foot reach, does some bludgeoning damage for the branch. 60-foot range and radiant damage for the pellet. A little bit of psionic-based spell casting, nothing crazy. And then a bonus action tongue attack that recharges on a 6. It can snare somebody. It's kind of almost like a roper tentacle here. 30 foot. They make a dexterity check. If they fail, they're grappled and pulled 25 feet towards it. Okay. Nothing crazy there. The priest has basically all of the same thing, although a little lesser stats, although it's spellcasting. It does have Revivify, and then has another bonus action on top of the tongue. Not as strong as well, can only pull to 25 feet. I think the Elder was 30? Oh, no, it is 25. Okay. The DCs are a little less, but it does have the Rally the Troops ability once per day. It ends the Charmed and Frightened condition on itself and each creature of its choice within 30 feet. That's actually a really cool ability to possibly think about applying to... and that's something that I also always like to look at when I see new monsters, is what things can I take and use elsewhere. If you were building some sort of NPC commander type character and you needed something like this Rally the Troops ability, would be something you could easily give to them. Someone that's kind of, again, this is a priest, but anybody kind of commander leader type could do something like that as well. The warrior looks to be just a lesser version of the elder in a lot of ways. Doesn't have any of the spell casting. It still only makes the 2 attacks. Its damage is about the same. Okay. Moving on, we have the Astral Elves. Again, these are a new playable race as well, contained in the Astral Adventures Guide. It says, let's see, the adventure included in this product features an amoral astral elf society called the Xerixian Empire. The empire is based in Xerixa space, a wild space system illuminated by an enormous radiant sun named Xerixis, the light of Xerixis being the name of the adventure. So we have 5 different astral elf options here. We have the Aristocrat, Commander, Honor Guard, Star Priest, and Warrior. Okay, so the Aristocrat, brilliant highborn leader gifted with magical abilities. Oh, and including the power to channel sunlight and summon a solar dragon. So challenge rating 8 here. Does wear elven chain armor, which is listed here. Doesn't require sleep at all, so unlike a traditional elf needing trance to kind of get sleep, these don't require sleep at all, or this particular one anyway. Still has Fey ancestry, 2 scimitar attacks, and a radiant beam. We can see again, here's the radiant damage that is added to the scimitar, an extra 3d6, or a radiant beam attack that I can do 3 times per day, which is a 60-foot long line, constitution saving throw, or 48 radiant damage. We have some limited spell casting. And then we have bonus action Starlight Step, just a teleport out to 30 feet. That's, I think the playable race has that as well. And then we have a Summon Solar Dragon once per day. A 50%, 50% chance of summoning a young Solar Dragon. Appears in an unoccupied space, acts on its own initiative, and is an ally to the summoner. Remains for 10 minutes. Okay. The Astral Elf Commander. I like the art here. This is giving me some pretty cool, like, Destiny Mass Effect vibes on this character here. So if we were to keep going, let's see what they have, what sets them apart. They do not have a Summon Solar Dragon ability. They also do not require sleep, no magical armor here. They have longsword and longbow attacks. It does more radiant damage for the commander at 4d6, and then the longbow also at range still does the radiant damage, and then just twice a day teleport. Okay. The Honor Guard here, a little more fanciful looking armor. We have, again, 2 longsword or radiant ray attacks. The radiant ray does 4d10. The commander doesn't have that. And then we have the Star Priest here. Going to have obviously more cleric-like abilities. Oh, hey, Dora. Hi, Dora. 2 Morningstar attacks. You can use Rain of Radiance in place of one of those attacks. Does 5d6 on its radiant damage. Rain of Radiance. Magical flame-like radiance rains down on a creature within 60 feet. They must make a dex save or take 5d8 radiant damage. And then we have some spellcasting, including an 8th level Cure Wounds. And then Starlight Step again, the teleportation. Interesting that all of them don't have the teleport. I wonder if that's a typo. Because you would imagine if it seems like Starlight Step seems to be a racial ability, but that the Commander and the Honor Guard don't have that. And then the Warrior as well does not have it. Just a seemingly lesser version here. Again, longbow and longsword. So again, this is challenge rating 3 rather for the Warrior, 5 for the Priest, 5 for the Honor Guard, 7 for the Commander, and 8 for the Aristocrat. Jumping ahead to the Autognome. Again, another one of the playable races that we have in the book here. We have just a standard Autognome, challenge rating 2. We can see this one's a little on the bulkier side. Several immunities here. Poison immunity, paralyzed, petrified, poison. Malfunction. When an Autognome takes 15 or more damage from a single source and isn't reduced to 0 hit points, roll a d20 to determine what its malfunction is. 1 to 10, nothing happens. 11 to 12, it's incapacitated for a minute. 13 to 14, its arms fall off and reduce the number of shock attacks it can make by 1. 15 to 16, its head falls off and deactivates, causing it to be blinded and deafened until a creature uses an action to reattach it. Or 17 to 20, each creature within 20 feet of the exploding Autognome makes a DC 13 or DC 11 rather dex save, or takes 40-10 slashing damage as it explodes and is destroyed. Has unusual nature, and then 2 shock attacks, which can be melee or ranged attacks. I wonder if there are player characters who would like to have this malfunction ability built into their player character. Now, maybe not if you roll a 17 to 20, you blow up, but something along those lines. Then we have a Braxat, which is a sort of Triceratops-looking creature here. Warm-blooded carnivore with a thick articulated shell covered in black, squarish head topped with horny protrusions, thick arms ending in long hands and opposable thumbs. These are a giant, which is pretty cool to change up as an interesting different change to giants in 5th edition. To acid and psychic damage and the charmed and frightened condition. They add their AC, intelligence modifier to their AC, which is pretty cool. 2 Great Clubs attacks, which have reach and do 3d8 plus 8 damage. Sorry about that. We have an Acid Breath and a 15-foot cone, DC 18 con save for 40-12 acid damage. We also have Compulsion and Fear as psionics, and then again, as a reaction, 3 times a day, we can do Psionic Shield, which is, it will be hit by magic attack roll or magic missile. It generates a source, a shield of some kind, from a source that it can see, if it is hit by an attack roll or a magic missile from something it can see, it can basically cast the shield spell on itself. Visible barrier until the start of its next turn. Okay, so this is one of those instances where we've seen sort of the updates from Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse, where they have added in, this character basically has, or this monster has, shield, as in the shield spell, but it is a reaction ability called Psionic Shield, not the shield spell. Therefore, it cannot be counterspelled. It's just something that they can do, so no counterspell here. Then we have a Brog, I'm going to guess is how you pronounce it. I don't think they've started doing, did they continue? This is one of my biggest complaints, because if you look back at earlier D&D Beyond releases, they released a pronunciation guide, where there was like a little sound speaker symbol here that you could click, and then someone, originally was Marisha Ray and Matt Mercer, later on it became folks like Chris Perkins, and they would actually speak the name of the monster that you're clicking on, so you would actually know how to pronounce it. And I do think it's weird that they just stopped doing the pronunciation guide. I thought that was another just like check in the box for why D&D Beyond was so useful, because you could have that. But all right, so the Brog, another giant creature here, with 4 arms. So 4 fist attacks or 2 rock attacks. Nothing too crazy here. Hideous Rend, though, this is a new ability. Uses all 4 of its hands to target one larger, smaller creature within 10 feet. Must succeed on a dex save or be grappled. Until it ends, the Brock can't make fist or rocks attacks, and the target takes 8d10 bludgeoning damage at the start of each of its turns. If it reduced to 0 hit points, it's ripped into 4 pieces, so it's grabbing and kind of rending, which is why it's called Hideous Rend. Then we have our good friends, the Chwinga, who we've had since Tomb of Annihilation. They also appeared, I think, in Rime of the Frost Maiden. They appear to be a personal favorite of the Wizards of the Coast team, as they do continue to show up. They are tiny little kind of... you could tell me they were Fey, and I'd believe it, but they are elementals. So we have Chwinga astronauts. They're the ones that live in wild space, dwell on habitable moons and asteroids, and they occasionally stow away on spelljamming ships or ride around on space guppies, as you can see here. Let's see. They also have air bubbles. Let's see. Charm of air bubbles. The charm allows you to cast the air bubble spell as an action. Once used 3 times, it goes away. Again, Chwinga have this ability where they sort of grant magical gifts to people. We saw this again back in Tomb of Annihilation. Using its magical gift ability, a Chwinga astronaut can bestow one of the following charms in place of one of the ones described in the DMG. We also have the Charm of Instant Tools. It allows you to magically conjure a set of Artisan's Tools, Navigator's Tools, or Thieves' Tools. They appear in your hand or somewhere else in your space. Once used, the charm goes away, but the tools remain. So I don't think there's much difference here. I'd have to go back and check, but the Chwinga astronaut has blind sight, evasion, unusual nature, doesn't require air, food, or drink. When it dies, it turns into a pile of moon dust, a cloud of glittering spores, a statue resembling its former self, a chunk of ice, or a sponge shaped like a dodecahedron. That's kind of a cool little funky ability. It has its magical gift that we just talked about. And then Natural Shelter. It takes shelter inside a rock, a bush, a tree, or a natural source of fresh water. When doing so, it can't be targeted by an attack spell or any other effect. And the shelter doesn't impair its blind sight. You can use its action to emerge. And then it does have some useful cantrip kind of based spellcasting. Although it does have, at will, guidance, druidcraft, pass without trace, and resistance. So beneficial things as well as things that allow it to hide. And they're cool looking. I like this one here with like the, almost looks like a fire skull kind of riding the space guppy, fishing for space guppies. All right, then we have a Cosmic Horror. For all of you Lovecraftian fans out there, from the Far Realm. A gargantuan aberration of a challenge rating 18. I think this is the most powerful creature contained within this book. Immune to poison and acid damage. Immune to charmed, frightened, and the poison condition. Legendary resistance 3 times per day. Doesn't need air. It can make 1 bite or 2 tentacle attacks. Nothing crazy on the bite, just reach and a lot of damage. The tentacles do a grapple. Until this grapple ends, it can't use those tentacles to grapple other targets. It has 1d8 plus 1 tentacles, each of which can grapple. It has Psychic Whispers, which recharge on a 5 or 6. 60-foot radius sphere centered on itself. Each creature within that sphere that isn't an aberration must make a DC 21 Wisdom save or take 60-10 psychic damage. And then it also has 3 legendary actions. 1 to use a Crushing Tentacle, which is a tentacle attack that does 3d6 plus 8 force damage. That's against a creature's already grappled. 2 to do a Poison Jet, a 30-foot line 5 feet wide. Each creature in that line must make a Constitution saving throw, take poison damage, or a 2-action 120-foot teleport. Then we have the Dohwar, who are basically penguin people. They look and they move like penguins, though they are not technically penguins. It says they're merchants. They're looking for an opportunity to turn a profit. Conduct their dealings in secrecy, and then we just have them as a standalone stat block here. Challenge rating 0. Merging. They have a telepathic conversion with each other and a third willing creature of their choice, provided all 3 are within 30 feet of one another, so they can basically open a psychic link. And then they just have a very minimal bite attack and psionics that allows them to cast Detect Thoughts. I think this is pronounced an Aesthetic. Biological symbiotic creation of a Reigar, which we'll see later on. An organic ship with only the barest hint of awareness. Without its Reigar to guide it, an Aesthetic becomes a nearly mindless entity with an instinct for self-preservation. We can kind of see it right here above me. Each are unique in appearance. Let's see. They are an aberration. They are challenge rating 12. As we can tell, they are basically just a means to traverse, is what it seems like, right? An Aesthetic contains enough interior space to comfortably accommodate its Reigar host and up to 6 medium passengers. It can survive indefinitely on the astral plane provided its creator is alive. If its creator dies, it sickens over a period of 1d12 days and then expires. Immune to acid damage. The blinded, charmed, deafened, exhausted, frightened, petrified, prone condition. Blind sight out to 300 feet. It is bioluminescent, so as long as it has 1 hit point, it sheds light in a 30-foot radius. Bright light in 30 foot, dim light in 30 feet beyond that. All of the interior compartments are dimly lit. The Aesthetic has the property of a spelljamming helm, but only its creator can attune to it. Also has unusual nature. We're going to see that a lot throughout here. 2 tentacle attacks, 30-foot reach, does a grapple. While they're grappled, they take acid damage at the start of their turn, and it can't use its tentacle to target other creatures. It has a d4 times 2 tentacles, each of which can grapple. And then as a bonus action, it has Jammer Scream, which is a cool name. Recharges on a 6. It targets a spelljamming ship within 300 feet, suppressing the ship's spelljamming helm for 2d10 days. That's pretty powerful. If the ship has more than 1 helm aboard it, which I didn't think they could, it randomly determines which helm is affected. A creature attuned to that helm can choose to make a DC 17 Charisma saving throw. On a failure, it takes 12d6 psychic damage, and the helm is suppressed for 2d10 hours instead of 2d10 days. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage, and it's suppressed for 2d10 minutes as opposed to 2d10 days. We have the Monger here, which is pretty cool looking. This is also an aberration. With its large mouth and eye are closed, the Monger looks nothing more than a 12-foot diameter asteroid. It has no use for treasure, but its belly might hold a fair amount of incidental valuables that it can't digest. It doesn't project an anti-magic cone from its eye as a beholder does. Magic is suppressed inside its gullet, which prevents a swallowed creature from using magic to escape. Challenge rating 10. Dark vision and blind sight. It can fly, obviously. We mentioned the anti-magic gullet, right? Any spell slot or charge expended by a creature in the gullet to cast a spell or activate a property of a magic item is wasted. While an effect is suppressed, it doesn't function, but the time it spends suppressed counts against its duration. No spell or magical effect that originates outside of the Monger's gullet, except one created by an artifact or a deity, can affect a creature or object inside the gullet. It has false appearance. We see this in a lot of things like mimics, where if they don't move, they kind of look just like what they're intended to be, in this case an asteroid. Unusual nature as well, and then it has just a bite attack. 2d6 plus 5 piercing. If they're medium or smaller, they must make a dex save or be swallowed and deposited within its gullet. Inside, they are blinded, restrained, have total cover, take 10d6 acid damage at the start of their turns, and as typical swallowing whole rules, if someone does enough damage to it, in this case 25 points, it may regurgitate the person up. Actually, no, there's no save. If it does 25 or more damage on a single turn, it regurgitates them, no questions asked. Usually it was like that thing would have to make a saving throw to see if it does. No, it just does it. Alright, this is pronounced a Feyr, F-E-Y-R, Feyr. A tentacled horror that feeds quietly on strong emotions. To minimize the chance of harm to itself, it prefers to... And so it's basically, it reminds me of like a ghost Pokemon. It's using Dream Eater here. It shuns bright light, but isn't harmed by it. They are much more at home in the void of wild spaces. They are in dark alleys and dungeons. So this could be something to imply in your game that's not necessarily set within Spelljammer, which is pretty cool. All right. Fear that comes across a spelljamming ship tries to enter a ship's envelope and stow away. Let's see. Once again, an aberration, challenge rating 5, immune to the frightened condition. That makes sense. Has a fly speed as well. It can make 1 frightful bite attack and 1 tentacle attack. Frightful Bite. It does piercing damage, and each creature within 10 feet of the Feyr that can see it must make a DC 13 Wisdom save or be frightened. Its tentacle is 10-foot reach, does psychic damage, and is also a grapple. Until the grapple ends, it only has 2 tentacles in which to grapple. I'm waiting for one of these to have a grapple that's also a restrain, but so far we haven't had one of those yet. It can become invisible until it attacks, uses Nightmare Fuel or a bonus action to become visible. And Nightmare Fuel is it targets an unconscious creature within 10 feet. That creature must make a Wisdom saving throw or take 5d10 psychic damage, and the Feyr gains temporary hit points equal to that full damage dealt. That's pretty nasty. And it's just cool looking. I like the look of it. It is interesting that I feel like a lot of the aberrations we're seeing so far in this book have vaguely Beholder-esque designs. Now, this is I guess, Gaj? Yeah, I guess Gaj. G-A-J. Hideous hunters that prey on intelligent life forms. They kind of look almost like a rust monster or like a Kruthic. They are also, shocker, aberrations. Let's see. What do we have here? The gadget makes one mandible attack and uses mind-probing antenna or paralyze if available. Yeah. Oh, so they're much. There's a person. They're much larger. They are large size, but they do vaguely remind me of a rust monster. Mandibles, 2d6 plus 3 slashing damage. The target is grappled. Until the grappled ends, the target takes 2d6 plus 3 slashing damage at the start of each of the gadget's turn. While it's grappled, it can't grapple anybody else. Mind-probing antenna. Targets one creature grappled by it, so it has to be in the jaws. They must make a wisdom saving throw, take 3d10 psychic damage, and the gadget magically pulls one piece of information from the target's mind that it wants to know. On a successful save, it takes half damage, and it learns nothing. Or paralyzed with 3 charges on a 6. Targets a creature within 60 feet. They must make a DC 12 wisdom save or be paralyzed for a minute. Target can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on itself on a success. These things are also intelligent. They have an intelligence of 12, which is not what I would have expected for some sort of insectile creature. Next up, we have the Giff. These are the hippopotamus-looking people. They are also, again, a playable race found within Astral Adventures Guide. We have 3 options here. We have the Shipmate, the Shock Trooper, and the Warlord. Here is the Shipmate, challenge rating 3. Again, they're going to have things that the Giff typically have, right? Mastery of weapons, firearms, ignore the loading property of any firearm. It also has an ability here called Steady as She Goes. On the deck of a ship, it has advantage on ability checks and saving throws made to affect it to be knocked prone or shoved overboard. Then it has multi-attack, longsword, and then a musket. Nothing crazy there. But it also has a force grenade. It throws a grenade up to 60 feet that explodes in a 20-foot radius. Each creature in that area must make a DC 15 dex save or take 5d6 force damage. After the Giff throws the grenade, roll a d6. On a roll of 4 or lower, it has no more grenades to throw. Then we have the Shock Trooper, which just looks, this armor looks fantastic. Has headfirst charge as a new ability here. Moves at least 20 feet in a straight line and ends within 5 feet of a larger, smaller creature. They must succeed on a DC 16 strength save or take 2d6 bludgeoning damage and be knocked prone. It also does double damage to objects and creatures, or objects and structures. Hey, Adam. You want to come up into the video, buddy? Come here. Hey, buddy. All right. Makes 2 great swords or musket attacks. The musket attacks are pretty much the same. The great swords are just great swords, and that has Thunder Bomb, which is sounds like a much cooler version of Force Grenade. It lifts a grapefruit-sized bomb and throws it at a point within 60 feet. Yeah, it does. And where it explodes. Each creature within a 10-foot radius sphere centered on that point must make a DC 15 dex save or take 48 thunder damage on a fail and half on a success. I like this new concept too, right? After it throws its bomb, roll a d6 on a 4 or lower. It doesn't have any more left. It's a simple mechanic to figure out how many grenades or things these things have. And then we have the Warlord here, much more seasoned, conquistador-ish in nature. Legendary resistance twice per day. Has a Morning Star, a double-barreled musket, and then it has legendary actions, which has 3. 1 is to just move without provoking attacks of opportunity. 1 is a Rallying Cry, where it ends the frightened condition on itself and each creature within 30 feet that it chooses. Or 2, weapon of choice, it makes 2 Morning Star attacks or 1 double-barrel musket attack. Next, we move on to the Githyanki. Interesting that we don't have Githzerai in here too, but I guess that's just because of the nature of being in the astral plane here. Again, we do have some of them. I think they are in, it says right here, Monsters, the Monster Manual and Monsters of the Multiverse. We have a little bit of art here as well with a Starseer. Sorry, Adam's knocking stuff over here. Starseer on the left, Xenomancer, which is a cool name, on the middle, and a Buccaneer on the right. Buccaneer, yep. All right, let's see. Our Buccaneer, challenge rating 3. Interesting that they don't have resistance to psychic damage like the Gith race does now, that you can play as. Let's see. 2 Greatsword or 2 telekinetic bolt attacks. Its Greatsword does additional psychic damage. Telekinetic bolt has a range of 60 feet and does 3d6 plus 3 force damage. Has light, Mage Hand at will, and then plane shift and telekinesis. Again, interesting. The Mage Hand is invisible, but it doesn't have the same spells that the races have. Then we have Astral Step that recharges on a 4 to 6 as a bonus action, which is a 30-foot teleport. The Starseer is a challenge rating 7. This is more of a spellcastery type. Has resistance to radiant damage. It can make 3 Astral Bolt attacks, which do 3d10 plus 4 radiant damage. And then again, with our psionics, we have Light, Mage Hand, Detect Magic, Invisibility, Mage Armor, Tongues, Contact Other Plane, Plane Shift, and Telekinesis. Once again, also having Astral Step. And then our Xenomancer has 3 staff attacks, 3 telekinetic bolt attacks, or a combination thereof. The staff does bludgeoning damage, and then 46 psychic damage. The telekinetic bolt does 3d10 plus 4 force damage. Oh, you hear Xander barking. And then it has spellcasting, Druidcraft, Light, Mage Hand, Invisibility, Pass Without Trace, Dominate Monster. You want to get down? Go get him. Force Cage, Plane Shift, Telekinesis, Astral Step, and then Parry. The Githyanki adds 4 to its AC against 1 melee attack that would hit it. Interesting that it didn't have anything. It has like that cool Space Guppy familiar. That doesn't have anything tied to that. Then we have the Hadozees, which we have 3 of them here. We have the Explorer, the Shipmate, and the Warrior. The Hadozees Explorer is challenge rating 2. It has its new version of the glide mechanic, or their version of the glide mechanic for the NPCs. If it's not wearing heavy armor, it can move. Yeah, so it's basically move 5 feet horizontally for every 1 foot it descends. 2 short sword attacks. It also has access to a musket. It takes the disengage or the hide action as a bonus action, and then has as a reaction it can drop any fall damage to 0. The Shipmate is a challenge rating 1/8, which just has basically the same abilities, although less attacks, no bonus actions, and then just a dagger attack. And then the Warrior is a challenge rating 1/2, has uncanny dodge, and then short swords and light crossbows. Nothing too crazy here. We have a Jammer Leech, which I guess is this guy. Let's see. Barnacle-like creature that begins as a space-dwelling spore, attaches to the hull of a spell-jamming ship. And then remains attached to the ship for a few days, punctures the hull, and begins to develop a hard shell that roughly matches the color of the hull, and it basically just feeds on it. Leech damages the hull of the ship, which is attached to and absorbs magic from the spell-jamming helm. Okay. Immune to Charmed, Frightened, Prone condition. Spelljammer Overload. If the Leech is reduced to 0 hit points while attached to a ship that has a spell-jamming helm, the creature attuned to the helm must make a DC 13 con save. On a failure, they take 44 psychic damage and are incapacitated for a minute. On a success, they take half damage and aren't incapacitated. It also has unusual nature. It has its Spike Tentacle, which does a d4 damage. It has bonus action attached to hull. It attaches itself to a ship hull, dealing a d4 piercing damage to the ship, ignoring the damage threshold. This damage can't be repaired until the Leech is scraped off. While it's attached, its speed is 0, and it can detach itself as a bonus action. As an action, a creature can reach it can make a DC 18 Strength check to try to remove it. Removing the Leech in this way deals no damage to the ship. And then Magical Discharge once a day. When it takes damage, the Leech can discharge a bolt of magical energy from its eye that targets one creature within 30 feet. They must make a DC 13 Dex save or take 3d6 force damage and be stunned until the end of its next turn. Kind of a cool little, like, space barnacle. I like it. We have the Kindori, which are essentially space whales, as you can see here. They resemble aquatic whales in general shape and are mammals as well. They are celestial creatures, challenge rating 7. They have a tail attack that does 3d10 plus 7 bludgeoning damage, and blinding eyes, which recharges on a 6. They emit a bright light within a 120-foot cone. Each creature within that cone must make a DC 14 Wisdom save or be blinded for a minute. Let's see. The bones and cartilage of a dead Kindori do not deteriorate after parasites devour the creature's flesh. The Kindori skeleton can be transformed into a spelljamming ship by placing a spelljammer helm inside it. They are peaceful creatures, but have many natural enemies, including lunar and solar dragons. Moving on to the Lunar Dragons, speaking of, which is something I was excited to get to cover. We can scroll down and take a look at what these guys look like. Pretty cool. I like the art here. It almost looks like a white dragon, kind of. So I think what we'll do is we'll cover the ancient versions of both of these dragons when we get to the Solar Dragon, and then because it'll give you everything you need to know about them, the lesser versions will just have less options. All right, also known as moon dragons or phase dragons, are capricious xenophobic creatures that make their lairs inside desolate moons by burrowing through the rocks. They enjoy depraving other creatures of treasure more than acquiring treasure themselves. Often found among the treasure in a lunar dragon's hoard are one or more spelljamming helms. They can become incorporeal. We'll take a look and see. Challenge rating 19. Okay, so this may be the strongest monster in the book. Has a burrow speed, a fly speed, immune to cold damage, 3 legendary resistance. Has the tunneler ability, so it can burrow through solid rock and leave a tunnel behind it. Does not require air. Bite and a claw attack. Its bite attack does piercing damage and additional cold damage. We have claw, tail, pretty standard. Does cold breath as its breath weapon. 90-foot cone, DC 21 con save, or take 8d8 cold damage. Half on a success. It can phase 3 times per day as a bonus action. Becomes incorporeal for as long as it maintains concentration as though concentrating on a spell. While partially incorporeal, the dragon has resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. And then has 3 legendary actions. 1 for a tail attack, 1 for treacherous ice. Magical ice covers the ground in a 20-foot radius sphere centered on a point the dragon can see within 120 feet. This becomes difficult terrain for all creatures except for lunar dragons. Lasts for 10 minutes or until the dragon uses this legendary action again. Or 2 for a wing attack. This is a pretty standard wing attack we see on most dragons, right? 15 foot. Each creature within 15 foot makes a dex save to take damage or be knocked prone. And then it can fly at half its speed. As far as its lair, we can see the regional effects here. Black frost covers the ground within 6 miles of its lair. If it's ancient, 3 miles if it's an adult. Haunting sound gets louder or fainter the closer one gets to the lair. Again, 6 miles or 3 miles based on ancient or adult. Moon devils, swirling funnels of dust and frost known as moon devils. This is basically like a dust devil, but on a moon. Crisscross the area within 1 mile of the lair, intercepting other creatures they encounter. A moon devil is a free-willed air elemental that deals cold damage instead of bludgeoning damage. And there you go. Interesting enough, we have nothing for the lair effect of a... That's odd. You would think there's not even like a... Really? Oh, it just really speaks to Spelljammer in general. Yeah, nothing at all for the lair actions of a lunar dragon. Maybe they anticipate you'll never fight a lunar dragon in its lair? That's odd. To give it regional effects. Oh, wait, does it say here? Depending on the composition of the moon, the lair might contain natural springs. Okay. We have... Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't actually give us any of the lair actions for a lunar dragon. That's kind of dumb. I love the wormling, though. It looks super cute. I like it a lot. Then we have a Megapede. Look at that guy. Enormous centipedes that can be as big as 150 feet long. Most specimens top out between 100 and 120. Yeah, that's a gargantuan monstrosity. There's some player characters versus a Megapede. Gargantuan monstrosity. It makes 1 bite attack and uses either Life Drain or Psychic Bomb, which is an awesome name for an attack. Its bite does 3d10 plus 6 piercing and 5d8 poison damage. Life Drain is each creature within 15 feet of it must make a DC 15 con save or take 3d10 necrotic damage, or half on a success. Interesting that it doesn't heal from that. I feel like it should, considering the ability is called Life Drain. So, either way, I would probably say that it gets either half or all of the health damage that it does back. It kind of just makes sense to me. Then we have Psychic Bomb. Targets 1 creature within 60 feet to make a DC 15 Wisdom saving throw. The target, if it fails, it takes 5d8 psychic damage and is incapacitated until the end of its next turn. On a success, half damage and isn't incapacitated. We have a Mercane, which is the creature you see right here. Merchants who trade primarily in magic items and advanced technology, including artifacts and spelljamming helms. 12-foot-tall, lanky blue giants dressed in elegant robes have elongated heads and long, spindly fingers. They are giants, so we'll get another new giant type here. Let's see. They communicate telepathically with any other Mercane it knows, regardless of the distance. They can make 3 psi-imbued blade attacks, which do 2d6 plus 3 slashing. Creatures must succeed on a DC 15 Wisdom save or be frightened. And then it has some minor spellcasting abilities. This could be an interesting thing if you're looking to have some sort of interstellar merchant to get your party access to different magic items and things. It says they'll conduct business with basically anyone. So, there you go. Then we have the Murder Comet here. Evil spellcasters create murder comets by combining the essence of earth elementals with that of fire elementals. A murder comet looks like a screaming stone head wreathed in flame. Trails fire behind it as it flies through wild space, either singly, or in a posse. That just doesn't make sense to me wording wise. But anyway, looking for ships, crews, and other unsuspecting targets to destroy. It is a challenge rating 5 elemental. It's only medium size. In my picture, in my head, that looks much larger than medium size because it's destroying that ship. But I guess it's the size of a player character. Alright. Immune to fire and poison damage. Immune to exhausted, paralyzed, petrified, poison, prone, and unconscious. It can explode. When it goes to 0 hit points, it explodes in a 20-foot radius sphere centered on itself. Each creature within that area must make a DC 16 dex save or take 86 fire damage. Fireball, basically. It has flyby. It illuminates out to 30 feet of bright light and then 30 feet of dim light. It does double damage to objects and structures. It does not require food, air, drink, or sleep. They can make a slam attack and a fire spit attack. The slam does a d8 plus 2 plus 2d6 fire, and its spit fire is a ranged attack that does 60-foot range, 2d10 plus 2 fire damage. So they're not actually, with a name like Murder Comet, I imagine them to be like pretty substantially damaging, but they're really not. I mean, the most damage they could actually do is when they die and blow up. Oh well. You have the Neh-thalggu. This guy, which is terrifying looking. It's like a spider beholder. Known throughout the multiverse as brain collectors, they consume the brains of humanoids and use them as receptacles to enhance their magical abilities. No shock in that they are from the far realm, and they are aberrations. After they kill a victim, they use their pincers to cut open the victim's head and remove the brain. It then swallows the brain whole. The collected brain is stored inside one of the several pockets in its head. Once it's collected 12 brains, it is overcome by an urge to return to the far realm and begin devoting all of its energy to finding its way home. In an encounter, roll 1d12 to determine how many brains it has already collected. This is a challenge rating 4 creature. Let's see, Brain Dump. What a name. Whenever it consumes a brain, it gains the magical ability to speak and understand languages known by the brain's previous owner. It doesn't need air. It can make 1 bite attack and 2 claw attacks. Its bites do 2d8 plus 2 piercing. Its claws do a d4 plus 2 slashing. It has Extract Brain, right? 1 incapacitated humanoid, it deals 10d6 piercing damage to them. If that reduces them to 0 hit points, it extracts their brains and consumes it. It can do a Mind Blast, similar to a Mind Flayer, but is only 1 humanoid within 10 feet. DC 14 Wisdom saving throw, take 2d8 psychic damage or become incapacitated. And then it has psionics, once per day each. It's based on the number of brains it has, I guess. Yeah, okay. So 1 is Arms of Hadar, 2 Detect Magic, 3 Magic Missile, 4 Tensor's Floating Disc, 5 Darkness, 6 Hold Person, 7 Invisibility, Spider Climb for 8, Fear for 9, Hypnotic Pattern for 10, Major Image for 11, and Stinking Cloud for 12. So these guys they do actually have for challenge rating 4, they have 95 hit points. So they're kind of terrifying, and what are they, large size? Yeah. These would be fun, though. I would like to throw these at my players. I'd also feel like you need to have a situation where you see the brain extraction to like really set the mood. Like the party comes across it and it's doing the process of consuming a brain. I think that would really kind of terrify them quite a bit, and I like that. Then we have Neogi. We've had these creatures before. They don't even have art of them here. They came, I think, in originally Bolo's Guide, so they must now be reprinted in Monsters in the Multiverse. An outsize, looks like an outsized spider. Outsize? I don't even know if that's a word. Outsized spider with an eel's neck and head. It can poison the body and the mind of its targets and can subjugate even beings that are physically superior. We have 3 options here. We have the Hatchling Swarm, a Pirate, and a Void Hunter. So the Swarm functions like most other swarms, and its resistances, immunities. Its Swarm ability, where it occupies creature's space, but has, and the swarm can move through an opening large enough for 1 tiny hatchling to move through. It can't regain hit points or gain temporary hit points. Normally, swarms have a reach of 0 feet in that they have to be in your space to attack. This one has a range of 5. Does 66 poison damage, or half that if it is less than half hit points. The target must make a Constitution saving throw or be poisoned. We have the Pirate. Neogi pirates are adult Neogi that serve as crew members aboard night spiders, which we will get to. Actually, that's one of the ships we saw in the Astral Adventures Guide, sorry. And then here is the Pirate. Has advantage on saving throws against being charmed and frightened. Has spider climb, bite, and 2 claw attacks with its multi-attack. Bite does, again, piercing and poison, and if you're poisoned, you make a Constitution saving throw, be poisoned for a minute. Then it has a claw attack, and then the Void Hunter, bigger than a typical adult, again, may be the role of a captain upon a night spider. Has, let's see, can see through magical darkness. Has the mental fortitude and spider climb. 1 bite attack, 2 claw attacks, or it makes 2 Eldritch Bolt attacks. Again, bite and claw, Eldritch Bolt is 120-foot range, does 3d10 force damage. And then Dimension Door and Invisibility, and then has a bonus action Enslave ability once per short or long rest. Targets a creature within 30 feet. They must make a DC 14 Wisdom save or be magically charmed for 1 day or until the Neogi dies or it is more than a mile away. The charmed target obeys its commands and can't take reactions, and the Neogi can communicate with the target telepathically as long as they're within 1 mile. Whenever the charmed target takes damage, it can repeat the saving throw. Then we move into Plasmoids. We have 3. Again, this is a new race developed for the Astral Adventures Guide. It's a player race as well. So we can see here, we have the Boss, Explorer, and Warrior. I like that the Boss, in my mind, this is like a mob situation. So the Boss is kind of like the bigger guy, and it's even doing like a hand gesture here. Has the resistance to acid and poison damage that the player race has. The same thing with Amorphous and Hold Breath. Has a pseudopod attack with advantage if it has 1 or more allies within 10 feet of itself. It's almost like a pack tactics. Does 2d6 plus 4 bludgeoning. And then also has Uncanny Dodge. This one's a challenge rating 4. The Explorer, a little more lithe, I guess, as it were. Challenge rating 1/4, though, not too much. Makes 2 pseudopod attacks, or can replace 1 with a Javelin. Nothing too crazy there. And then the Warrior, challenge rating 3. I love seeing this with the sword, spear, and then also the gun. Makes 3 pseudopod attacks. It can replace 1 of those with a spear or pistol attack. Again, nothing too crazy here as far as damage and things go. So it does have the AC with the shield. All right, Psurlons. That's these guys. If I recall, these are the ones that are from Dark Sun, if I recall, from what you guys have told me. Maybe I'm wrong. Or maybe that's Surin. It's one of the ones with a funky name. Malevolent worm-like creatures that live on the astral plane. A fully grown specimen is 7 feet long. They have legs that end in hooves and arms that end in hands with 3 long fingers. They live for thousands of years because they spend most of their time in the deep astral. On the material plane, they have been known to work with mind flayers. Let's take a look. Here's this guy. They're very gross looking. Resistance to psychic damage, immune to blind and charm, blind sight out to 120 feet. They can read, magic can't read their thoughts or put them to sleep. Make 1 bite and 1 claw attack, nothing crazy there. And then they have Psychic Crush, which is kind of what seems like their signature ability. Target a creature within 120 feet, they must make a wisdom save or take 2d10 plus 3 psychic damage. And then again, some psionic spellcasting and disguise self, mage armor, and suggestion. Here is the leader. This goes up to challenge rating 6 from the previous challenge rating 2. Oh, it's got a head on its butt. Look at that. Has 2 heads, so it has advantage on saving throws to avoider and frightened, stunned, or unconscious. While 1 head is asleep, the other is awake. It can make 2 bite attacks and 2 claw attacks. It can also use Pacify if available. So let's see. Pacify is a new ability here for this particular one. Recharge 5/6. Target 1 creature within 120 feet to make a wisdom save or fall unconscious for 10 minutes. The condition ends if the target takes any damage or if another creature uses an action to wake them up. Psychic Crush, and then we have some more psionic spellcasting, disguise self, mage armor, dimension door, suggestion, and then the Psurlon Ringer. Let's see, this one can use magic to assume the form of a specific medium humanoid. Okay. Immunity to resistance to psychic damage, immunity to charm. Let's see. It says that I can do that, but I don't see where. First, this Ssurlon must consume, consume the creature it wants to imitate. It then enters a sonic trance for 8 hours, at the end of which it takes on the appearance of the creature it ate. The Ssurlon gains the creature's memories and languages, but none of its class features or other abilities. The transformation is permanent and can only be undone by a wish spell. Despite appearances, the Ssurlon Ringer is still an aberration, and other Ssurlons recognize it for what it is. That's really interesting, because none of that stuff is described in the stat block, so if you didn't read the flavor text for it, you would never know that it had that ability. And then again, it just has 2 dagger attacks, a psychic crush, and then some spellcasting. And move on to the Reigar, androgynous folk who evolved into a humanoid shape from a species of cephalopods. So basically they used to be octopus people, sounds like. And now they have come into a humanoid shape. Bioluminescent freckles and the ability to change the coloration of their skin. A halo surrounds them as well. And then we have Talarith, which is a legendary magic item made by Reigars. The Reigar who created this piece of jewelry chooses its form: bracelet, brooch, diadem, necklace. While the Reigar wears the Talarith, any weapon wielded by the Reigar deals an extra d6 force damage when it hits. As an action, a Reigar can use its Talarith to summon a golem that looks just like the Reigar. The golem obeys the Reigar's commands and uses the Reigar's stats, except it is a construct and does not have a Talarith of its own. The golem vanishes after 1 hour. R2 is reduced to 0 hit points. After summoning such a golem, it must finish a short or long rest before it can use this property again. That's a pretty powerful ability, and I can see why it's only usable by the Reigar who created it, because player characters would be using this all the time. So again, they are a celestial creature. We can see one here as well. Let's see. It adds its charisma modifier to its armor class. Holds its breath for an hour. It wears Talarith. Makes 2 trident attacks, which do piercing damage, and then add the force damage if it's wearing a Talarith. Chromatic Bolt, which has a 90-foot range, does 5d8 damage from either cold, fire, lightning, or radiant you pick. Has some psionic spellcasting: light, mage hand, prestidigitation, dimension door, phantasmal force, mass suggestion, sending. And then again has the golem summon ability. Interesting that that is described in the Talarith magic item here in the flavor text, and then they also put it down here in the stat block, but the Ssurlon's ability to consume someone and take their form isn't described in the stat block. We have, here's some more Ssurlons, I guess, or maybe these are Scavvers? No. Scavvers are shark-like scavengers. These are them. Whoa, these are cool looking. Shark-like scavengers. There's 4 different options: brown, gray, night, and void. Fly through space, feeding on whatever they can fit in their mouths. They're not always aggressive. They often trail behind larger creatures and asteroids, basically looking like to be scavengers. Okay. Brown scavengers are 10 feet long. They swallow their prey whole. They are challenge rating 4. Swallowing bite, 2d6 plus 4 piercing. They're medium or smaller. They must make a dex save or be swallowed. And then we have typical swallowing rules, although these ones do have a saving throw before the regurgitation happens, unlike the asteroid, whatever it was called, the Monger. Yeah, Monger. The gray Scavvers are challenge rating 1/4. Just have a bite attack with advantage if they're missing hit points, similar to all sharks. We have the night Scavver, challenge rating 5. Nothing crazy here. Again, same thing, just piercing damage. And then the Void Scavver, challenge rating 11. This one's got some unique abilities here. Has the swallowing bite. That's all pretty standard stuff, but then also has Ray of Fear as a bonus action. Recharges on a 4 to 6. Targets a creature within 60 feet. They must make a DC 16 Wisdom save or be frightened until the start of the Scavver's next turn. Moving on, we are into Solar Dragons now. So, here we have our Solar Dragon. These guys look awesome. I love the design of these. So here's our Ancient Solar Dragon. Challenge rating 21. So I'm sorry, maybe this is the strongest creature in the book. Immunity to Radiant in the Blinded condition. Has Flyby, Legendary Resistance. Magic can't read its mind. And then siege monsters have double damage to objects and structures, as well as doesn't require air. It has a bite and a tail attack. The bite does extra radiant damage. It has Photonic Breath. So it exhales a radiant mote of flashing mote of radiant energy that travels to a point within 240 feet of itself that blossoms into a 40-foot radius sphere. So it basically shoots out a fireball made of radiant damage that explodes in a 40-foot radius. Each creature within that must make a con save or take 12d10 radiant damage, half on a success. Has 3 legendary actions, 1 for a tail attack or 2 for blinding brilliance, which is it emits light in a 30-foot radius centered on itself. Each creature within that radius must make a DC 23 wisdom save or be blinded. So this one has a lair. Let's see if it gets lair actions. Let's see. Star in which a solar dragon makes its lair has the following effects on creatures. The creature within 10 miles of the star or inside it is blinded by an intense light unless the creature has protective gear to shield its eyes, such as goggles of night or similar form of eyewear. Stellar incineration. Any creature that enters the stars or starts its turn inside it takes 24d10 radiant damage. I guess it probably doesn't need lair actions because it's literally living inside a star. So I guess I can give that one a little bit of a pass. Alright, then we're into this Space Clown. Because Chris Perkin wanted us to make space clowns. Inhabitants of wild space known as Clown Space. They inhabited the system's 3 ring-shaped worlds. Their faith in the god of revelry. Their worship ceremonies were centered on festivals and frivolity. Over time, the people's happiness hinged on the ever-increasing consumption of an elixir called Thrill Joy. Only after they became addicted did they discover that the priests of their faith had distilled the elixir from the demonic ichor and nectar of the bozo flower. This is just ridiculous writing. Eventually, Thrill Joy transformed the faithful into fiendish creatures and blessed them with clown-like appearances. Okay, they're fiends. When they die, they explode in a putrid splash of corrosive ichor, or ichor, depending on how you pronounce it. Every creature within 5 feet must make a dex save or take 3d6 acid damage. They are squeakers. The clown wears shoes that squeak when it walks that can be heard out to a range of 30 feet. The squeaking is silenced while the clown's phantasmal form is in effect. It makes a shock for 46 plus 3 lightning damage. That's its melee attack. It has a ray gun, as you can see in its hands here. 120-foot range, 2d6 psychic damage, and if the target is a humanoid with 3 or more intelligence, it must make a DC 12 wisdom save. On a failure, it perceives everything it sees or hears as hilariously funny, and is incapacitated for a minute. Spellcasting, Friends, Mage Hand, Prestidigitation, Mirror Image, and Spider Climb, and then again has this phantasmal form 3 times per day. It veils itself in everything it is wearing and carrying as an illusion that makes it look like some other creature of its size or smaller, such as a child, or an object small enough to fit into the clown's space, such as a floating balloon. There's your it reference there. Maintaining this effect requires the clown's concentration as though concentrating on a spell, and the illusion fails to hold up to physical inspection. As an action, a creature that can see through the clown's illusory form can make a DC 15 Wisdom Insight check, piercing the illusion and discerning the clown's true form on a success. Hey, buddy, you back? Then we have a Space Eel here, which basically is a beast. So, hey, druids, if you want to have a space form for your wild shape, we have the Space Eel here. A small beast, challenge rating 1/2, has a multi-attack, 1 bite attack, and 1 tail spine attack. Its bite does piercing damage, and it attaches to the target. While it's attached, it can't make bite attacks, but it can just deal a d6 plus 1 piercing damage at the start of each of its turn, and detach as a bonus action. And then someone can detach it with an action, and it has a tail spine, a d4 plus 1 piercing damage, and the target must succeed on a DC 10 con save or be poisoned for a minute. Until the poison ends, it is also paralyzed. Nothing crazy, but it's nice to have something else for, and it can fly, right? So something for druids to turn into, which is pretty cool. Then we have the Space Guppy, which is also a beast, which is cool. 2 to 3 foot long creatures that glide through space in the astral sea. Chwinga astronauts sometimes use them as mounts. And we can see here that it has an air envelope of itself. It has at least 1 hit point. It can generate an air envelope around itself within a vacuum. It is enough to stain a guppy and 1 other tiny creature. So again, Chwingas in this instance. Fly by, and then it has a tail slap that does 1 bludgeoning damage. Then we have our space hamsters of Boo fame here. We have the giant space hamster right above me. Here you can see it looks to be like a gnome or a halfling. A large beast, again, for you druids out there. It does 2d4 plus 2 piercing damage. Nothing too crazy, but it does have a burrow speed. And then we have, that's the giant space hamster. Then we have the traditional space hamster, which is a monstrosity. So you can't turn into that. But it has a bite ability, and then, of course, it has Go for the Eyes, which recharges on a 6, does a d6 plus 5 piercing damage, and the target must make a DC 15 dex save or be blinded until the start of the hamster's next turn. And then again, it can disengage or dash as a bonus action. We have the Space Mollymawk, another beast, which is essentially a space seagull. It's a small beast, challenge rating 0. It also has flyby. It can hold its breath for 15 minutes and does a d4 plus 2 piercing damage. This could be something I could possibly see a DM allowing a wizard to use to make a familiar. The Space Mollymawk here. We have the Space Swine, yet again, another beast for you druids out there. A flying pig. Challenge rating 1/4. 40-foot movement speed, 40-foot fly speed. Pretty solid. It has a bite attack. Not tusks, though, interestingly enough. A bite attack that does a d6 plus 1 piercing damage. But we can see that it can have up to 16 AC with its half-plate barding here. I think this is awesome. I love seeing more beast options in the game for the druids to turn into, and there's just some real funky ones here, so I like that. All right, we're starting to get towards the end here. We have the Psurlon, a lizard, Suran, I guess maybe, lizard folk who have adapted to life in arid climates and in wild space. It says you can use the lizard folk stat blocks in the monster manual to represent them, in addition to the variants described below. These guys look awesome. Look at these body types. Awesome. Okay, so the Defiler. You have the Defiler and the Poisoner. The Defiler has resistance to necrotic damage. It can hold its breath for 15 minutes. It adds its intelligence modifier to its AC, which you can see here. It makes 2 claw attacks and uses Defile as this multi-attack. Its claws do a d6 plus a d8 necrotic damage. Defile recharges on a 6. Ordinary vegetation within 10 feet withers and dies. In addition, each creature within 10 feet of it must make a DC 11 con save or take 40-10 necrotic damage. Half on a success. It regains 5 hit points for each creature that fails the saving throw. And then it has some limited psionics and an invisible mage hand and invisibility. Then we have the Poisoner. That was a challenge rating 3. The Poisoner is a challenge rating 1/2. Which you can hold its breath, can make 2 claw attacks, has a javelin, and then the big thing here that's unique to it is the Poison Bomb. It throws a tangerine-sized bomb at a point up to 60 feet where it explodes, releasing a 10-foot radius sphere of poisonous gas that disperses quickly. Each creature within that sphere must make a DC 11 Constitution saving throw or take 3d6 poison damage on a fail, half on a success. And then again, we have this new feature that if it rolls a d6 and has a 4 or lower, it has no more bombs to throw. We have a Starlight Apparition here. Transparent projections of unfortunate souls who perished in wild space, basically a space ghost. Not to be confused with Space Ghost, which is very different. Or in the Astral Sea are known as Starlight Apparitions. Each one has a luminous incorporeal appearance that resembles its former self, but with eyes that glow. A medium celestial, challenge rating 5. Has a lot of resistances here. Oops, sorry. Let's get that out of the way. Acid, cold, fire, bludgeoning, piercing, slashing from non-magic, immune to poison and radiant, and then immune to blinded, charmed, exhausted, frightened, grappled, paralyzed, petrified, poisoned, prone, and restrained. It can only exist on the astral plane. If it is sent to a location that's not the astral plane, it's destroyed. If it has 1 hit point, it sends bright light out to 20 feet, dim light to 20 feet beyond that. It can move through creatures and objects as if they were difficult terrain with its incorporeal movement. Also has unusual nature. Radiant Eruption is a ranged or melee spell attack. Does 5d6 plus 3 radiant damage. The target is a creature, must make a wisdom saving throw or be blinded. Half success or half damage on a success, no blind. And then has possession, so it is a ghost essentially, right? Chooses a creature, they make a charisma saving throw or be possessed by. Yeah, that's basically a space ghost in all aspect of the thing. The only downside is turn undead does not force the ghost out of the body like it would with a traditional ghost, because this is a celestial and not a ghost. It says it lasts until the body is dropped to 0 hit points. The apparition ends, it has a bonus action, the body leaves the astral plane, or the apparition is forced out by an effect like Dispel Evil and Good. So that is one way to remove them, because turn undead won't work. Okay, that's pretty cool. We have the Thri-Kreen, which again, a playable race here. We have some options, the Gladiator, Hunter, and Mystic. The Gladiator here is a challenge rating 7, has 2 Githka, which looks to be, I'm assuming, this weapon, which I would have loved to have had a stat block. Oh, I guess we do have something. I spoke too soon. They often use weapons of their own design, particularly the Githka, a 2-handed polearm with a blade at each end. and a light thrown weapon called a Tchachka, a flat triangular wedge with 3 serrated blades. It's almost like some sort of throwing disc kind of a thing. Githkas typically have shafts of bone and obsidian blades, while Tchachkas are usually made of sharpened bone or crystal. Again, this would be a great opportunity for these to have stat blocks, to be a unique weapon. We got the double-bladed scimitar in Eberron, which I thought was awesome to see a new weapon type enter the game. We got the Yikalwa in Tomb of Annihilation. I would have loved to have seen these guys get stat blocks for unique weaponry as well. Because, yes, I understand that they are primarily designed for the Thri-Kreen to use specifically in these particular monsters, but if you're playing a Thri-Kreen and you want to use your traditional cultural weapon, it'd be cool to have that. Or if you have a Thri-Kreen companion who gives one to you, you fight evil Thri-Kreen and you get one. Yeah, my point. So it makes either 2 Githka or 1 Tchachka attacks. Oh, and 1 Tchachka attack. So the Githka here says with advantage, if the Thri-Kreen is missing any hit points, just does 2d8 plus 4 slashing damage. I was wondering if we'd have some sort of cool, like, double attack, but I guess not. And then the Tchachka here, again, with advantage if it's missing any hit points. A range of 30, 120, and does a d6 plus 4 slashing damage. So in that aspect, it's really no different than a javelin. It does a leap where it jumps 20 feet in any direction, provided its speed isn't 0, and then has parry that adds 3 to the AC. We have the Hunter here. Again, 2 attacks, 2 either melee or ranged. And, the damage on the melee goes down to a d8 for this particular character. It has the Chameleon Carapace, though. Changes the color of its carapace to match the color and texture of its surroundings, gaining advantage on stealth checks and for hiding in the surroundings areas. Again, leap, and then a parry for adding 2 to the AC. And then the Mystic, as we can see here, 2 Githka attacks or 4 Psychic Bolts. Psychic Bolts have a range of 60 feet and do a d6 plus 3 psychic damage. It also has a Drain Vitality ability. One creature chooses a target within 30 feet. They must make a Constitution saving throw or take 5d12 necrotic damage. It regains hit points equal to the damage dealt, and then has Levitate, Mage Hand at will, and then Freedom of Movement and Invisibility once per day, and then also has the Chameleon Carapace as a bonus action. Then we move on to Vampirates, which I guess are vampire pirates, but they need their own stat block. I have many questions about this book as a whole, this whole series of books, but either way. Vampirates are the walking, talking husks of dead pirates who refuse to go quietly into the afterlife. They ply the void in their ships, plundering unsuspecting vessels and feeding on the life energy of those unlucky enough to cross their path. A vampirate appears as a gaunt figure with milky white eyes and skin as dry as parchment. Some have a peg leg or a hook in place of a hand, mementos of a life of adventure. Let's see. Vampirates eat, drink, and sleep because they like to, not because they must. They rest in wooden coffins or crates full of grave dirt. In the absence of these containers, they can treat their ship's hold as one big coffin. When they're not sleeping or marauding, a crew of vampirates whiles away the hours by drinking rum and singing grim chanties. A ship crewed by vampirates usually has one or more shadows aboard, the undead remain of some of the vampirates' victims. So we have a vampirate captain, and a vampirate mage. Okay? They are undead. They're vulnerable to radiant damage, immune to cold, necrotic, and poison damage, immune to charmed, exhausted, and poisoned. When they die, they explode in a cloud of ash, dealing necrotic damage to creatures within 5 feet. Only a d10, though. Spider climb, unusual nature. And they have energy drain or a crossbow attack. The energy drain is either melee or ranged, does 2d10 necrotic. If the humanoid is reduced to 0 hit points, they are transformed into a free-willed shadow under the DM's control. I feel like they had the pun vampirate in their head, and then they just were like, ooh, let's make that a monster. Because honestly, you could have just given a different type of vampire, because these are different than your traditional vampires. They don't have sunlight sensitivity. They don't have any of the traditional things you think about vampires, but they are vulnerable to radiant damage. And then we have the vampirate captain. It is often accompanied by an undying companion, such as a crawling claw or will-o-wisp. Again, same kind of resistances. Still explodes, does a bigger explosion when it dies, though. Has its energy drain ability. I think it does a little bit more damage, does 40-10. Oh, and when someone dies from it, they become either a shadow or a vampirate. That's the captain's choice. Has a heavy crossbow and then ship invisibility as a once for short or long rest. A ship upon which the captain stands, along with all creatures and objects on board, becomes invisible to creatures not aboard the ship. That's actually a super powerful ability to be able to turn your whole ship invisible for up to 1 hour. That would definitely allow you to possibly get outside of the air envelope of another ship and then kind of enter hyperspace, as it were. And then has uncanny dodge as well. And then the vampirate mage, again, still has the explosion, spider climb, unusual nature, has the energy drain, which does, again, only a shadow, has a ray of cold that has a 120-foot reach and does 2d8 plus 2 cold damage, and then some spell casting here, mage hand, message at will, once per day, darkness, dimension door, fly, hypnotic pattern. And then lastly, the last monster on the list here is the Zodar, which is a aberration. Shocker, lots of aberrations in this book. A bipedal entity whose body is encased in obsidian skeleton. It has no facial features aside from the 2 narrow vertical slits that resemble eyes, and its countenance betrays no hint of pain or emotion. Underneath its armored exterior, Zodar's body is composed of tightly knit muscle fibers that make it incredibly strong and heavy. A Zodar weighs 1,500 pounds. Challenge rating 16, aberration here. Immune to acid, fire, poison damage. Immune to the blinded, charmed, deafened, exhausted, frightened, petrified, and poisoned condition. Blindside out to 120 feet. As a disembodied voice, up to 3 times in its life, the Zodar can cause a message of up to 25 words to issue from the air around it. It speaks only when it has something profoundly important to say, and the message can be understood by any creature that has an intelligence score of 2 or higher. I have this really stupid idea now to make like a Silent Bob Zodar, because it only speaks when it has something profound to say and can only do it 3 times. 3 legendary resistance, transport inhibitor. It can't be teleported or sent to another plane of existence against its will. That's an interesting, unique ability, the no sent away kind of thing. Can't banish it or anything. Again, unusual nature, standard for most creatures we've encountered thus far. And it makes 2 Crushing Fist attacks. Before or after these attacks, it can use Forced Teleport. Crushing Fist does 2d10 plus 10 force damage, and then Forced Teleport magically warps space around a creature it can see within 60 feet. The target must make a DC 21 con save. On a failure, it takes 4d10 force damage, and it teleports it, along with any equipment it's wearing or carrying, up to 60 feet to an unoccupied space it can see that can support the target. On a success, the target takes half as much damage if it isn't teleported. And it can also cast Wish, requiring no spell components, and using Charisma as the spellcasting modifier with a DC 17 save for it. After casting this, the Zodar turns to dust and is destroyed. I don't really know much about the history of Zodars, but this is really cool. I really like these guys, right? One interpretation of its behavior posits that as each Zodar has a specific mission and is relentless in its pursuit of the goal, but it reacts oddly towards situations not involved. It can use speech to issue force from the air around it 3 times in its lifetime. When it feels compelled to speak, it chooses its words wisely. It can also warp the fabric of the multiverse to cast the Wish spell. I've never heard of these creatures, but these are awesome. I like the design is kind of cool. I don't know. I like it. So there you go, folks. That is my hour-long video covering all of the different monsters in the Boo's Astral Menagerie. Having looked through all of them and talked through all of them with you, the ones that kind of call out to me as ones that I really enjoyed, I liked the Fear, the sort of seep into your brain Dream Eater kind of monster. I thought that was pretty cool. I obviously am going to like the dragons, right? They're pretty cool. The lack of lair information, like I said, I get the lack of lair information for a solar dragon because its body is, its lair is literally a star, and you take like 24 d10 radiant damage just being there. But the lunar dragon lives on a moon. You could go visit that moon. So interesting that that's not there. The Neh-thalggu, the little kind of beholder brain eater crab thing, that was kind of cool. The Scavvers, they're just big. I like that we have space whales, but also space sharks. I thought the space guppies were cute. I can see those being a familiar for somebody. And then the Zodar, right? That just these really, just I'd love to know more about the history of a Zodar. I might have to do some like research on, like if these were made up for 5th edition or if these exist from older editions. I think they're really cool. So, anyway. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. Which is your favorite monster introduced in these books? Did they do one of your favorite monsters from 2nd edition Spelljammer dirty when they imported it here to 5e? Because I'm sure that's happened to some folks. I'm sure it's happened to a bunch of folks. I've seen it with even monsters I like from 3.5. They brought them to 5e, and I didn't like the choices they made, like all of the dragons, for example. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll see you all next time. Oh, and this officially marks me being done covering official Spelljammer content. We've done it all, so that's done now.